I want to welcome everyone. We are pulling folks together and offering this opportunity as we prep for the legislative session to provide a series of public policy hours to talk about the issues impacting women and girls. When we lift women out of poverty and into economic stability, our entire community and our entire state benefit. And so there will be several opportunities for you all to use your voice in the upcoming legislative session. Today, we'll look at some of the issues impacting and supporting the economic security of women and families that are carryover bills from last session, and discuss important issues that impact women. Specifically, we're going to talk about paid family leave and efforts to support pay equity. And I would just say that we don't know all the bills that will be introduced in January, but we're hopeful that after today, you'll have a good understanding about why these issues matter and why your voice is needed. After our conversation with our next two guests, which I'm very excited to introduce, we'll also discuss a little bit about statewide and local efforts to raise the minimum wage. So now we'll get started. We have invited Senator Patty Pansing Brooks and Senator Machaela Cavanaugh here to join us today. They will give us a little bit of a preview for the next legislative session, and I encourage you all to use this opportunity to ask them all the questions while you've got them. They have been such tremendous leaders in our legislature and in our communities on issues that are important to women and girls. I always hesitate to start naming some of the things that they've worked on, because honestly, these two in particular have done such tremendous and broad work that intersects and supports women and girls. You know, Senator Machaela Cavanaugh has worked on domestic violence and protection orders with the Women's Fund. She introduced a bill a couple of years ago that has been incredibly impactful in ensuring that survivors seeking protection orders have an opportunity to be heard before the judge and their request for safety through a protection order. She is a passionate advocate for maternal health. She is a passionate advocate to support individuals with disabilities, really has done a tremendous amount of work, and we want to thank you for joining us today, Machaela, Senator Cavanaugh. And then Senator Patty Pansing Brooks is from Lincoln. She has been such a leader in the body and, quite frankly, in the nation around efforts to support survivors of sex trafficking. She has been a leader in the body on pay equity, passing a bill on pay transparency, and she'll talk a little bit about that work today as that continues. She's been a leader in juvenile justice and workplace equity and equality. And so we are just more than honored to have both of you join us and talk with us a little bit today about a couple of bills that are top priorities of the Women's Fund. So we can jump right in, and Senator Cavanaugh, if you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit of information about LB 290.
Thank you, Tiffany. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Thank you, Tiffany, and to the Women's Fund for inviting me today. And I'm so excited to be here with my colleague and friend, Senator Pansing Brooks. It's amazing to work with her and to learn from her. And I'm very gracious for that opportunity. So paid family medical leave has been a long passion of mine. It's actually one of the two reasons that I ran for the legislature, that and to increase funding for developmental disabilities. And so these are two things that have been really a cornerstone of my passion in public policy. And I followed the work of Senator Sue Crawford when she was in the legislature for 8 years working on this. I actually prioritized her bill my freshman year, LB 311 at that time. And unfortunately, it made it to the floor, but it didn't progress. So I'm hopeful that we will see a change this year. But the essence of what this legislation is intended to do is to create a more welcoming workforce environment for not only working mothers, but families and just individuals as a whole. If we've seen nothing else and learned nothing else from COVID, it is how important having that financial security if a major illness or unexpected illness is to befall a family, then they have to take time away and they don't have a choice in the matter, to have that sort of safety net of knowing that at least you can still cover your bills for the short term. And so LB 290 seeks to make sure that families and individuals in the workforce have that ability to take time off when they need to, especially unexpected things, but also to take time off to care for someone. And that's a really important piece of this, is that it's not just if a woman has a baby and you need to care for yourself and another human, but if you have a sick parent or a sick spouse or a child who is having a major surgery, and this even extends to military service members. If you have a service member who you are the next of kin that needs your support, it broadens the definitions a bit to what includes family, to be inclusive, intentionally inclusive, especially when we're talking about LGBTQ families. And so I call this version the Cadillac. I think that it is I'm very proud of what we've accomplished here. I think that it's a great model for what paid leave should actually look like if we're intentional and want to be equitable and address the actual needs of our workforce. I think that this version of this bill is really excellent. I'm not sure that this is the version that we'll end up with, but I'm very proud of the version we have right now. So thank you.
Cavanaugh, can you tell a little bit about what can the folks who are attending today, how do you think they can impact or weigh in or use their voice in support of this issue?
Well, I think the most important thing you can do is to contact your own state senator. And I know people say that and they feel like it goes into a void. It is really important. Even if I'm your state senator, it is really important, because if we don't hear from constituents, then it's very easy for senators to dismiss an issue. If they feel like, well, this isn't important to my constituents because they aren't contacting me about it. And so that's really the most important thing, is to contact your state senator and hold them accountable and share your stories, share how this would impact your life, or how having paid leave, if you have it in your job, has positively impacted your life, and what it means for employee retention and driving up our workforce numbers here in Nebraska.
And one more question, because I hear this a lot. Can you make the distinction between a paid leave mandate and a paid leave insurance program, which is what your bill represents?
Boy, mandate is something we're hearing a lot. So an insurance program is, basically it's kind of like the unemployment insurance. Companies pay into it, and a small percentage, less than 1% of their wages that they pay out is what they would pay into this insurance program. There would also be some upfront dollars, either from the state or from private foundations, or from the ARP funds that we are getting from the federal government. There's lots of opportunities in how we fund this upfront. But this is an insurance program just like unemployment insurance, and it is only drawn upon when necessary.
Great. I think that's so helpful, because one thing that I think gets lost is that we pay into this insurance program, and then if an employee accesses available leave under the bill, it is the insurance program that then pays the wages during that time of leave. So the employer then has the opportunity to redirect the wages that they had intended to pay that employee to help them meet their needs. Whether that be increased overtime or through bringing in temporary help and that sort of thing. I think that's really important, especially for nonprofits as well. We would be able to make this insurance program available to us under your bill. And I think we should look at it as an opportunity to provide these important benefits to our employees, and less as something that's being mandated that we do.
Right. Yeah, excellent point, Tiffany, that it is something that you pay into, again, like the unemployment insurance, and then the employee seeks those funds through just filling out the application, but they get the funds reimbursed to them from the insurance pool, not from the employer. And so the employer then is freed up to use up the resources that they would be paying the employee to hire somebody temporarily, or as you said, overtime. And so it really does create a more holistic view of the workforce and the role that they play in the work that they're doing and the company that they're working for, the nonprofit that they're working for. So yeah.
And then finally, so the bill has advanced out of committee, right?
Yes.
So it
Yes, it
sits
has.
on general file. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means and what we can expect?
Sure. So there's 3 rounds of voting in the legislature. The first round is general file, then it's select file, and then final reading. So you have to make it through all 3 rounds. So when we return next session, it is on general file, and so it will have its first round of floor debate. I actually don't know what number it is on general file, so we might not get to it in regular order. It might have to have a priority in order for us to get to it. So every senator gets one priority and a session. And so it is certainly something that I will be considering very seriously as my priority. But I do have some other things that I'm thinking about as well. So I'm just going to see how the start of the session goes.
Well, thank you. And I think it's important to note for our participants that when you do reach out to your state senator, it is important to note that this bill is on general file. Sometimes if they're not in the committee, on the committee of jurisdiction that handles the issue, they may sort of think, well, I don't have to deal with it until it gets out to the full body. And in this case, it is ready and available for full floor debate. So I'd encourage all of our participants to start thinking of some questions. We're gonna move on to Senator Pansing Brooks and talk a little bit about pay equity and the salary history ban, but feel free to start putting in questions. It can be about the bills that we're talking about, or it can be about the session in general. So start thinking about what you would like to ask these senators, and we'll move to some Q&A. But first, I want to invite Senator Pansing Brooks to tell us a little bit about your work on pay equity, and in specific as it relates to LB 249.
There we go. Thank you, Tiffany. And it's always a pleasure to be on the same screen with my friend and colleague, Senator Cavanaugh. I'm really grateful for her vision and her abilities in the body, and her strength and determination. So we have a great time working together, that's for sure. And of course, I'm always grateful to you, Tiffany, and the Women's Fund for the work that you do and the support that you give us as we move forward on all sorts of legislation. It's clearly important to have your voice out there and to have you helping to support us and rallying troops to get other people contacted. So thank you for all that. So I'll just start with 2 years ago, I had LB 217, which was basically a bill that made it illegal, a bill that stopped it from being illegal to discuss wages if you're an employee. The National Labor Relations Act did originally say that employees can discuss their wages with other employees, but there were specific groups not included, including state and local government, people that were working under the Railway Labor Act, as well as ag people, agricultural people, and supervisors. So if I don't know, supervisor at Walmart or Target was discussing it, they didn't have the protection to be able to discuss that. And so part of the problem with that, and you know, the goal is pay equity. That's our goal across the board. And that's what we really are fighting for. But to do that, we have to chip away at some of these barriers that are already set up in the system. So one of those was a barrier that said, you can't talk with your colleagues about your salary. Well, that's just absolutely absurd. You know, I know in the state legislature that all of my colleagues are getting $12,000, which isn't a lot, but if Senator Cavanaugh were getting, $112,000, I'd have some things to say about that. And, we're both doing the same kind of work. So the same kind of thing at businesses. So we got that passed. It was basically quite a copy of legislation. A lot of it was quite similar to legislation that Senator Fisher brought in Congress. So that made it a little easier to pass in the body. And that was the Workplace Advancement Act at the federal level. So anyway, that bill has passed, and now employees can discuss their wages with other people within the same business. So I think that's positive because, of course, then you're able to talk to the employer like, well, XYZ is getting this much and I'm doing all this other stuff that they aren't doing. So that allows people to advocate for themselves and be able to work towards pay equity. So this year, I have a bill, LB 249, that Tiffany mentioned, and that bill is currently still in committee. And LB 249 ensures that what it does is takes out the ability for an employer, when someone is being hired, when someone is applying for a job, you do not need to tell your past salary history when you're applying for that job. Because of course, as we know, in Nebraska, women are making 77 to 78% or 77 to 78 cents on the dollar as a man. And it's even worse for women of color. I'm just going to go through that really fast. The women, let's see, sorry, I have that right here. I can't find it. Women of color make, I think it's 67. Okay, I had it, now I can't find it, sorry. But the numbers are terrible, and it goes clear down to 44 cents. Here it is, 44 cents. So in the US, it's 80 cents to each man's dollar. In Nebraska, it's 77 cents to each man's dollar. The African Americans are 65.5 cents to each dollar a man makes. The Latinas are 57.5 cents to each dollar that a man makes. And the Native Americans are 44.7 cents to the dollar. So this is a problem. This pay equity gap is a real problem. And so what happens is, when people are applying to, say you have a man and a woman applying to a job. And so if the employer, the prospective employer asks, well, how much do you make? And the woman makes less than the man, then the unfairness begins immediately, because they think, oh, well, we'll just hire this woman who has the same qualifications, the same education, the same experience, but we can get a far better deal on this woman. That's not the point. The point isn't to hire women because we're a better deal. The point is to pay people appropriately and to pay according to the job that you are bringing them into. So this is something that sort of gets me geared up, because it just doesn't make any sense. And so the goal is to take the history out of the whole hiring process. If you are seeking somebody, then you better figure out how much that person is worth to your company and whether you can pay it. Don't ask what the other person is getting, because then what happens is, after that person is hired, if a woman is hired at a lower level, and then they all of a sudden institute neutral practices like a 3% raise across the board for all employees. That sounds good because it's fair, it's across the board. But if you hired two people, a man and a woman, and the man gets more, of course his salary is going to exponentially raise over time. And the statistics show that a woman working 40 years makes $418,000 less than a man. So that woman would have to work 20 more years and work 60 years in her life to be equal to what a man is making. So these are ridiculous and dire statistics. They don't have anything to do with capability or value of the person being hired. And this is all about fighting discrimination and racial bias and gender bias, and making sure we aren't exacerbating the wage gap by where you start in your salary. Just because the woman was discriminated in the first job doesn't mean the discrimination should continue. So that's where we are on that little thing. Basically, you can't inquire, the bill says you can't inquire about salary history. You can't require as a condition of the interview information on the salary history. You cannot, you can't retaliate for not giving that information. And you can also not rely on that salary history to determine future wages. So that's what the bill is about. And I'd love you to call the committee people, especially the committee people, to get it out on the floor. So that's what we're working on.
Thanks, Senator. And I think so that bill is in Business and Labor, the Business and Labor Committee, right?
Yes.
So if your state senator happens to sit on that committee, that's even more important to reach out to them. I think it's also important to note, Senator, the pushback that I've received when I chat with some folks on this bill is, well, what if I'm applying for a job and they offer me a salary that is below what I make now? I believe, and I'd love to hear your thinking on it, but your bill allows for disclosure.
Yes.
If I so choose, it is simply
Right.
that the employer cannot
Yes.
require that of me as an applicant, right?
Exactly. Yes. It's all about putting the hands or power in the hands of the women, and the power in the hands of the people who are going for employment. And, the number one issue for the state chamber is workforce development. We don't have enough people. So to be discriminated against the ones we have, we could bring more women to this state with this kind of policy and have more workers. So it's really important.
I mean, what if we just tried to make Nebraska the best place to work as a woman? How about that? Think about that
how
for
about that?
recruiting. And both of your pieces of legislation, I think, speak to that. Both Senator Cavanaugh and Senator Pansy Brooks. So we did have one question, which I think is great, and we'll give you an opportunity to talk a little bit more. Is there significant bill opposition to these bills already, and why?
Go ahead, Senator Cavanaugh.
Well, yes, I would say for mine, and the fact that Senator Pansy Brooks' bill is still in committee. It was actually quite a challenge to get the committee to hold an executive session to vote on my bill, even though I had the votes to get it out of committee. So that sort of is a starting point of, clearly this is going to have some contention if the people that are in charge of the committee are refusing to hold a vote, knowing that it has the votes. As to the why, that's a much more complicated question. I think, we're seeing this at a national level, the conversation about paid leave and a national level, and we're hearing, and this is not a Democrat or Republican issue. We're hearing from Democratic US senators about wanting to put in what they call guardrails. And I think it's a lack in some instances of education about what this is and how it works. Some people have already implemented similar programs on their own, and they actually don't realize that that's what it is. Senator Sue Crawford and I had traveled the state together with the state chamber and met with different businesses across the state, and learned that there were businesses that had a long-term disability and a short-term disability leave program. So they were already paying into an insurance program that did the same thing. And they just didn't quite make the connection that this would be a program that everyone would participate in. And I think there's a lot of education that needs to happen around the issue. But that's kind of, I think it's just philosophies of how we should handle our workforce are different.
And I would just say, from the previous work on the previous bill, businesses want to maintain every single piece of control and power that they have. And I understand the need for businesses to thrive in Nebraska, and as businesses and ag does well, lots of boats rise. But also, we have to recognize that practices that are discriminatory and do not help the employees, it is not good for Nebraska. It's not good for our economy. It isn't good for bringing people to Nebraska And so I think that it's, old-fashioned visions of how important business is. It is very important, but old-fashioned just views of how much laws like this can really improve our economy and help Nebraska thrive.
I think both of these issues too are such an important response to the way the pandemic has impacted women in the workplace, right? And these challenges of caregiving and pay equity are not new, but they have truly been exacerbated by the pandemic in so many ways. And so I think moving forward with a strong momentum and movement to say we want to make Nebraska the best place to live, work, raise a family. I think both of these issues are critically important. And so I just want to thank you both for your leadership and for working so hard on behalf of women and girls in all the ways as you advocate with your colleagues at the legislature. We have a couple more minutes, if you don't mind. I would just love for you both to sort of give us a quick preview of what you anticipate coming this session. What should we keep our eye on? How do you anticipate it going? So we'll open that up and see if there are any more questions while you give us a little sneak peek.
Go ahead, Machaela.
Oh, you go first, Patty.
Well, I don't know. I'm concerned about many things. I'm glad we got the redistricting done in a way. It wasn't perfect in any manner whatsoever, but we can now move forward and look at other issues that are before us. And otherwise, I think the session would have been just mired totally in the special session issues. I don't know if Senator Cavanaugh agrees, but so I think, I've got some things that are coming up that I care a lot about. There's one on truancy that we're pretty close to passing. That's a juvenile justice law. I have another bill that will take out of the Nebraska Constitution that marriage is only between a man and a woman. We'll see how that all goes, but we have to keep pushing the bubble and pushing to protect Nebraskans, to show kindness and welcoming and just caring for our fellow Nebraskans. That's what we really need to do. And please, all of you, consider running for office. It's really important. So much can happen on the local level. So yeah, exactly, Machaela.
When women run, we win.
Yeah, thank you for having me here today. And I'm so proud of all your work, Tiffany, and the Women's Fund.
Oh, thank you. We
And
couldn't
great.
do it without champions like you both in the body. Senator Cavanaugh, anything you'd add?
Ooh, it's a short session, 60 days. We're going to have the American Rescue Plan dollars that we have to figure out how we're going to spend. And I'm focused a lot on making sure that we spend that in a way that is equitable and impacts the communities that have been the most heavily impacted by the pandemic, which are communities of color and women. And so I just really want to make sure that the legislature maintains a focus on that and doesn't lose sight of why we're receiving those dollars. Additionally, I just think for me, my agenda is always to push forward for equity and dismantling systems of racism. And I'm going to try and get my maternal health bill moving forward and try and get developmental disabilities passed and fingers crossed paid leave. So, and anything that Patty Pansing-Brooks introduces, I want to vote for. So.
Thank you.
Well, thank you both. Thank you again, Senator Patty Pansing Brooks and Senator Machaela Cavanaugh. We had posted both of their links on their legislative website in the chat. So please check them out. Please look at all the incredible issues that they're working on and use their voice to support them. Thank you to you both for, again, being such champions for women and girls at the legislature. And we are so appreciative of you.
Thank you. Thank you
Sure.
very much. Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Thank
folks.
you.
And now, friends, we're going to pivot. We are so lucky to be joined today by Nancy Williams. Nancy is the co-founder and president and CEO of No More Empty Pots. Nancy's going to be joining us today to talk about a statewide initiative to raise the minimum wage. So with that, Nancy, I'll turn it over to you.
Hello, how are you? Hello, everybody.
Great, thanks.
I know that we didn't do a run through and I'm jumping from one meeting to the other. And I think my espresso may be kicking in a little bit here. So I just want to make sure that I follow through on what you need me to cover. So where should we start?
Sure. So you are a leader of this initiative. You are on the ballot committee. Can you talk to us a little bit from your perspective about why you think it's important to raise the minimum wage?
Absolutely. Thanks for hosting this opportunity to share this. There is a lot of work happening right now with the Raise the Wage Nebraska, where we are working to raise the minimum wage over a few years to get to $15 an hour by 2026. What we've seen, the reason first of all, the reason to raise the minimum wage is because it costs more money to live, to buy healthy food, to have affordable housing, and to be able to support ourselves on more than $9 an hour. To be able to afford a place to live it's right now not possible for folks who are earning a minimum wage. And it will affect over 100,000 of our neighbors in the state of Nebraska by raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Specifically is important to me because over the course of my lifetime, I've had the benefit of not having enough money to live and take care of myself and our family, and needing support to get there, and seeing the drastic difference, and not just my life, but my family's life when I earned more money. And the same thing for everyone in our household and in our families. And more recently, in our communities and where I work, we moved our starting wage at No More Empty Pots to $15 an hour. And we have $13 an hour for the students who go through our training programs, because we see the difference when our staff and our students have more income. They show up to work more consistently because they have the support they need. They show up to class more consistently because they can afford they have more support for their housing. They can support more consistent and affordable and high quality childcare. And they can focus. It is hard to show up and be present when you don't have your basic needs taken care of. And you have to go through several different agencies and support to try to get that done. When we see the difference, when people just have the money to do it, then they can decide and have that agency for themselves, and they can be more present and live to their fullest potential.
That's right, Nancy. And this issue intersects with the Women's Fund and the issues that we care about, because we do work in the area of economic stability. And we know that the majority, I think 70% of our low wage workforce are women, and in particular, Black, Indigenous, and Latino women. And so we do a lot to build systems of support around families to ensure they have access to support with affordable childcare and affordable healthy food. But also a lot can be accomplished by ensuring that families have the resources that they need to meet their own needs, right? And I really appreciate your personal experience and the experience that you've seen as someone running a business, right? So thank you for sharing that. So this is a ballot initiative, right? This is not legislation. This is something that is coming directly to the people. What will that look like? How can folks who are on this call and interested, how can they sign and how can they support the effort?
Well, there is actually something happening next week around launching the initiative. So you should see some things showing up in social media with Raise the Wage NE. There's Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. There are ways to interact online through social media to get connected with folks who can help you sign the petitions. We do have people out across the community that have the petitions to sign so that we can get the signatures we need to get this on the ballot. We have ways for, let's see, there is an event happening, I believe, on November 9th at 9:30. So that would be Tuesday. And there is a link, and I can share the link if you don't have that already, about the event that is happening. And it's also for local leaders to get connected, for advocates to get connected, for workers to get connected. And you can also get links to donate to the initiative as well.
Great, Nancy, thank you. I'm gonna see if there are any questions from the audience. If you want to put them in the Q&A or in the chat, I think that would be great. So this would take, as you said, take the minimum wage up in increments. So starting in 2023 to $10.50, then annually lifting it up to $15 in 2026. And then from there, it adjusts annually based on a cost of living, right? So in theory, we won't have to come back and do this again, that it will adjust and keep up in some ways. Can you talk, Nancy, I know there is, at least in the last effort around the minimum wage to raise the minimum wage in Nebraska, there was some opposition from the business community. Can you tell us what pushback you're hearing, if any, and how you might respond to that?
Actually, I personally haven't heard any pushback yet. So I guess I'm in the circles that understand the trials and tribulations of trying to live on less than $15 an hour. But the thing that I notice and I hear is that everyone who's trying to hire for positions that they have had open for months, or they've had a lot of staff leaving or renegotiating, what is it going to take for them to be there? They realize that this is a part of what it takes for business. The cost of things are going up across the board, whether people are earning more or not. And so we have to do what we can to ensure that the folks that we need to actually make our businesses run, our organizations run, that support us in our work, have what they need so they can show up. Because I will tell you that every successful business owner knows that they don't run their business alone. They depend heavily on the work of the employees that show up every day. That is how the business runs. And if we don't take care of our staff cannot take care of others, and our businesses will not run.
That's right. And I mean, I think you sort of alluded to this earlier, when employees are better compensated, they are better able to engage in other ways of their life. So you mentioned school, but I also think when they have more resources, they put those resources back into the economy, right? They're able to buy more things. And so that circulates and has a multiplier effect as well for the broader economy.
Absolutely. And we especially see that in food when we support local food systems. We see those dollars circulate at least 1.5 times and sometimes up to 2 times in both the communities where the food is being produced and where the food is being sold. So it's an opportunity to support rural and urban communities at the same time with that reciprocity and ensuring that our farmer neighbors who are supplying food can also afford the food that they are providing for the rest of us.
And sort of speaks to this idea of making Nebraska a great place to live and work, right? So I think that seems to be a theme that's arising from today's conversation. We have a question, well, someone expressing gratitude for you and your work on the minimum wage, Nancy, and then saying, how is signature gathering going in other parts of the state? Do you have any insight or should we stay tuned?
I think you should stay tuned. When we are in our meeting, there's an update meeting on Monday where we will get more information on how things are going around the state. But I've also heard that there are initiatives in other communities around the state. So we will hear the impact of some of that on Monday, and stay tuned. I will share that with Tiffany so that she can share that back out with this audience.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Nancy. I really appreciate your time. I know you're a very busy person. So grateful that you could join us and share your insight. And we're grateful for your leadership on this issue. And so thank you so much.
Thank you. And make sure you sign the petition if you haven't. The work that we do now helps to make Nebraska the better place for all of us.
Thanks, Nancy. You're so great. Thanks for all your work and your commitment to our community and our state. So I also wanted to raise up, we'll let Nancy go because like I said, I know she's a very busy person. Also want to raise up, you may see there's another local initiative gathering signatures. I know they are working together with the statewide initiative. There's a local initiative to raise the tipped minimum wage. Currently for tipped workers, the minimum wage is $2.13 an hour. The statewide initiative that Nancy discussed would only raise the regular minimum wage, the non-tipped minimum wage, and would leave the tipped in place at $2.13. So there's a local effort in the city of Omaha to, again, incrementally raise the tipped minimum wage over a number of years to $15 as well. They need to reach a certain threshold of signatures to get that on the ballot for November 2022. Both of these initiatives are aiming to be on the ballot in November 2022. That local initiative on tipped minimum wage, I think is also in the ramping up stage. So, but you are able to find some information about it on Twitter at Power of People Omaha. Yeah, Jill's put it in the chat there. So if that's something that you're interested in, want to connect to that, you're able to do that in that way as well. So again, please, I'd encourage you to keep adding some questions to the chat if you have them. Our experts have left us, but I will do my very best to try to provide some insight from the Women's Fund perspective. A couple of other big issues that we see in this area that will be before the legislature this session, or will likely be before the legislature this session. We anticipate some more movement around childcare. As I said earlier, we know affordable and high quality childcare has always been a challenge for caregivers. We know that caregiving responsibility tends to fall primarily on the shoulders of women and working women. And we know the impact on women in the workforce that the COVID pandemic has had when caregiving was not available, when daycares and childcare closed, when schools closed. It's had a tremendous impact. In fact, recent data shows nationally that 4 in 10 women are considering leaving the workforce, and 79% of women are experiencing and feeling significant burnout. So ensuring that our systems of childcare and leave are available will help women stay engaged in the workforce and also meet the caregiving needs of their family. The Build Back Better Act that is working its way through Congress currently includes some pretty substantial and exciting investments in childcare. And so if those make it across the finish line at the federal level, there'll be lots of work in Nebraska to implement those fully and really take advantage of the opportunities that those give us to expand affordable childcare for more families. There will also be some work around the childcare workforce. And this is important to the Women's Fund because the childcare workforce is primarily women, and ensuring that we are supporting their continuing education, their hiring and retention. It's been a really difficult field for folks throughout this pandemic. And so what ways can we support childcare businesses? Any investment in affordable and high quality childcare is an investment in our workforce. It's an investment in our economy. I also think as our employers struggle to find people to fill the jobs that they need to do the work, we have highly qualified, highly educated candidates right here if we can help them also balance their caregiving needs. And so again, all of these issues that we've talked about will help us do that. So it doesn't just help women and girls, it also helps our communities and our economy. I anticipate there will be some movement around housing as well. There was a pretty substantial movement around housing in LB 20 last year that it did pass. It was introduced by Senator John Cavanaugh. It included provisions that supported victims of domestic violence in obtaining safe housing and protections from eviction, but it also included a number of other housing provisions that supported renters. So I don't know that we'll see as much movement this session because there was such large movement last year, but there may be some work around non-discrimination protections for renters, specifically LGBTQ plus renters, or non-discrimination based on the kind of income that you use to pay your rent. So whether that be a public source of income like SSI or rental assistance, for example, that has been made available during COVID, but also Section 8 housing affordability vouchers. We think there will be some movement around increasing access to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. And again, this is a program that exists to make food more affordable and available for folks with lower incomes. We passed a historic advancement last session by making more families eligible for that program. Yet there are some significant and unique barriers that remain in that program, particularly for individuals who have previously been engaged with the criminal legal system. So there will be a bill, Senator Megan Hunt has introduced LB 121 last session that will continue this session to remove barriers for certain individuals who have completed their engagement with the criminal legal system and now may need a little support to put some food on the table. So there'll be interest and energy around LB 121 with Senator Hunt. There will be some work early in the session around closing the gap in access to unemployment insurance for work authorized immigrants. We are, I believe, the only state who does not make unemployment insurance available to immigrants who have work authorization. So if they were to lose their job, they are unable to access that temporary supportive unemployment insurance. And of course, that was devastating during the pandemic. Senator Mike McDonnell introduced LB 298, which actually passed the first round of debate and awaits the second round when they'll return in January. So look for some movement on that. And then of course, at the Women's Fund, we remain firmly committed to access to comprehensive health care, which includes comprehensive reproductive health care. Access to comprehensive reproductive health care supports the economic stability of women and families. The ability to choose when, if, when and if to start a family or how to start a family is central to a woman or a birthing person's ability to have control over their own life and their economic situation. So this session, we will continue to protect against any threats to bodily autonomy and the ability of women to control their own reproductive lives. So again, I'm happy to answer any questions if folks have them. Just a little bit of context about where we'll be. The session starts January 5th. It's always the first Wednesday after the first Monday in January. This is the second session of the biennium. So it's the shorter session. It's 60 working days. They will convene in June and be in session roughly until April. At least that's how it's scheduled now. Any bill that was introduced last year and has not passed or has not been indefinitely postponed or there's been some formal action to stop it will still be available for action this year. So that's why we discussed Senator Pansy-Brooks LB 249, and that's why we discussed Senator Machaela Cavanaugh's LB 290. Those bills will both be available for action, but all the bills, as I said, unless formal action was made to stop them, they will be available. Senators will also be able to introduce new bills in the first 10 days of this session. So there were 684 bills introduced last session. I think we can anticipate another 400 or so to be introduced this session. That's typically how that goes. And so it's also, I want to flag that because of redistricting, you should make sure that your senator that you had last session is still your senator this session. There was some adjusting of district boundaries as a result of changes in population. And so I think Jill had put the link in the chat earlier, but just double check to make sure that the person you have built a relationship with and is still your person. And if not, make sure you introduce yourself to your new state senator. And then again, as some additional context for the session, they reorganize themselves at the beginning of every biennium. So, and when I say reorganize themselves, I mean they decide who is on what committees and who is going to lead what committees. So they did that last session. That will remain this session. So it will be the same committee chairs, the same committees. And so that will allow them to, so we kind of have a sense of the governance structures that stays the same as last session. So I think with that, I'm happy to answer.
We have, Tiffany, there's
questions.
one question in the chat about, they're kind of both repo rights, which we are having a session on December 10th. So make sure you register for that. The first one in the chat is from Cindy. Is there concern about the legislature taking up a bill to prohibit local school districts from teaching comprehensive sex education?
I think that was certainly a concept that was brought up in the context of the State Board of Education's conversations around comprehensive health education standards. For those of you, I'll just provide a little more context. The Nebraska State Board of Education is an elected board that began a process last winter, February, March, January, I'm not sure, at some point in the last year, to create non-mandatory health education standards. At the Women's Fund, we advocated that those standards should be inclusive and comprehensive. And when we say, and science-based, and when we say inclusive, we mean that they should recognize all identities that students bring to school. And when we say comprehensive, we mean that it should also include sex education. And so that process was put on pause at the department or at the State Board of Education at this point. But there were many legislators who were interested in the topic and some that did express that perhaps legislation needed to be pursued. At this point, there are no requirements governing the types of health education that students should receive. So I think we could potentially anticipate efforts to say that, to dictate what kind of health education students receive. I think it's possible that there would be both legislation to require comprehensive, medically accurate health education. And I think it's possible that there would be contrary efforts that would say you cannot discuss sex education in schools. Again, I want to stress that the health education standards that the State Board of Ed was pursuing were not mandatory for school districts. They would create the standard, and then school districts still had the opportunity to determine whether those standards fit for them, and then determine what that education actually looks like by picking the curriculum and how that would be taught in their schools. So I think this will likely be a conversation that we're preparing for at the legislature.
And then there's one question in the Q&A. Do you see it?
Yeah, again, so I know what you know, right? If you read the paper, I think that it is clear that there is a conversation among anti-abortion advocates that it's possible they would take the Texas model and try to pass that here. Obviously, there is tremendous legal interest around the Texas law, not to mention the sort of devastating impact it has had on women and birthing people in Texas. And so we will be prepared if that should come forward, and continue to advocate that women and birthing people should be able to have control over their own bodies and determine when, if, and how to start a family. Any other questions? All right, well then we will go ahead and jump off. I want to thank y'all so much for being on this call and being part of this conversation with us. It's always evolving, so we won't know until January when this all gets rolling, but really appreciate your interest in learning more and helping us prepare to use our voices in January. Jill's posted on our screen some ideas. We'd encourage you to sign up for our policy updates. We'll have the next public policy Power Hour on November 19th to talk about gender equity and how we can support LGBTQ plus Nebraskans. We'll have one on freedom from violence in December, and then another conversation around repro in December. So we hope you'll be able to join us. Sign up for our email, follow us on social, and we look forward to advocating with all of you on behalf of women and girls. Thanks again.